Hello and welcome to Wagner's Tech Talk. Today we're going to take a look at the NESPi 4 case, or NESPi 4 case, by RETROFLAG. While it looks like a classic NES console, it's actually designed for the Raspberry Pi 4. We'll unbox it and go through the assembly. We'll also set up an SSD drive inside this pretty cool looking cartridge. I'll also show you how to easily set up the safe shutdown scripts. In the show notes below, you will find chapter markers, so if you need to skip around, you certainly can. Keep in mind, if you do, you may miss out on something very important. I'll also have links to all the items shown in this video. We've got a lot of fun stuff to cover, so let's go ahead and get started. This unit was sent to me by RETROFLAG for this review, and of course it was designed exclusively for the Raspberry Pi 4 Model B. Looking at the contents of the box, there are two packages here, as well as some instructions which are rather good and step you through the build process rather easily. Alright, well, let's put this away and go ahead and take a look at what's in here. We've got the power supply, and of course the NESPi itself. That's a nice looking case. Check that out. It's got a power button here on the front, a reset button which will restart your Pi 4, a USB 2 port, as well as USB 3. A cool feature of this case is that you can place an SSD drive directly in this cartridge and load up all your games. Very cool. On the bottom you have a storage compartment for your micro SD cards, should you have a whole bunch of them that you want to try out, maybe with different operating systems. And inside here, what's this? A nice reminder to remove the SD card before installing the Raspberry Pi. Good idea. Here's our accessories pack with screws and screwdriver, our fan. And looking in the case here, we see our USB ports. We've got a USB 2.0 port, as well as a Ethernet and USB 3.0 port. This kit did not include a Raspberry Pi 4 Model B, so I'm going to go grab one, and we'll move on to the assembly. Alright, now let's put this thing together. We'll start out taking a look at the fan. That is nice. Heat sink and fan all in one. Looking at the other parts here, we have the long screws go into the case, smaller ones for the cartridge, thermal adhesive, and two screws for the fan and a screwdriver. Cool. As I mentioned, you will need a Raspberry Pi 4 Model B. I'm going to go ahead and attach the thermal adhesive to the CPU, and the same for the memory. And we'll go ahead and plug in the USB 3.0 port here on the bottom and set it inside the case. Plug in the RJ45 or Ethernet connector and the USB 2.0 cable over to the top, like that. And we're making progress. Let's see. We've got the USB 3.0 port, the USB 2.0 port, and the Ethernet all connected. Now we'll go ahead and attach the fan, and we'll make sure that the wire is pointing towards the GPIO, and we'll secure it with these two black screws. When attaching this cable, make sure you double check the orientation is correct. You want the red and black wires there pointing towards the front of the case. Very cool. And then we're going to attach the fan wires. And to do this, it's a little bit tricky getting up under here. I tried it with my fingernails for a little bit, and then I kind of gave up and just went with some needle nose pliers, which made it quite a bit easier for me anyway. And just gently push it into the connector port. You don't want to apply too much pressure, it might break. Okay, so now we've got everything wired up here, and here's our fan wire and our GPIO connector here. I highly recommend using the shutdown script, so if you are, you also need to go to the switch over here and flip this to the on position for the safe shutdown scripts. And here's the cover. It is a USB 3.0 port, you can tell by the blue connector. And inside here, you can see it does have a SATA connector here for the SSD drive. And we're going to go ahead and connect up the USB 3.0 port to the empty port here on the Raspberry Pi 4. And we'll go ahead and close up the case, like so. And it does kind of snap a little bit. And you'll want to go ahead and apply a little bit of pressure as you're screwing this in, just to make sure that you get the screws all the way in and the case fully tightened up. Now for this next step, we're going to go ahead and install an SSD drive into this cartridge. Now this is an optional step. You don't have to use this if you don't want to. You can install all your games on the micro SD card, which we're also going to do. But in my case, I just want to put all the games on this cartridge. I just thought it'd be fun to try. That's a 240 gigabyte Kingston SSD. To assemble it, I just set the drive in the tray and went ahead and used these wider screws to secure the SSD drive to the back of the cartridge cover. So you just pop it in there and secure it, and then go ahead and snap it all together. And it does kind of snap, but you definitely want to use the screws to hold everything in. So I'm going to go ahead and screw them in. And that's pretty much it as far as the cartridge. Now that everything is assembled, let's just take a quick look at all the buttons and stuff. There's your power, your reset, your USB 2.0 port, your USB 3.0 port. On the side over here, you have your micro SD slot. That's where you're going to put your RETROPIE micro SD. Your two micro HDMI ports are over here on the left. Your AV connector is right here. And your USB-C power and your gigabit Ethernet. I already have a video that covers RetroPie 4.6 for the Raspberry Pi 4, as well as a web page if you go to wagnerstechtalk.com rpi4 gaming. And if you want even more, check out my 10 RetroPie tips for the Raspberry Pi 4. Lots of good information there, and it'll save you a lot of searching. In this video, I'm going to use the new PiOS imager to install RetroPie. To do that, scroll down till you see RetroPie and select the option for RetroPie 4.71, and then choose your micro SD card that should be plugged into your computer, and then click Write. Once you're sure everything is correct, go ahead and click the Yes button, and it'll write RetroPie to your micro SD card. It'll take a little bit of time, but once it's done, you'll see this dialog. Simply click the Continue button and go ahead and close out and safely eject your micro SD card. Then go ahead and remove the micro SD card from the sleeve and pop it into the NESPi 4 case. For this next step, I'm going to use this USB 3.0 to SATA 3 hard drive adapter and plug it into the 240 gigabyte SSD that we have here. And the opposite end is, of course, USB 3.0, so you want to plug that into a USB 3.0 port on your computer. From there, we're going to create a subfolder. So we're going to go to New and Folder and give the folder a name. And that name will be RetroPie-Mount. Press Enter. The reason for doing this is once RetroPie boots with the SSD installed, it's going to create some default directories for our BIOS, our ROMs, and everything, so we don't have to manually create all those subfolders ourselves. So just pop it in the case and plug in the HDMI into the far left port and your power, your USB-C. For the initial setup, you will need a USB keyboard, so go ahead and plug one in. It doesn't have to be this particular kind, it can be any keyboard. And a controller as well. And then once you do that, hit the power button on the front of the case. And everything should boot up here, and you should see a red LED. That's a good sign. Now we'll switch over to my video capture card and go ahead and set up the controller. So I'm going to hold down a button and go through the steps for mapping each of the buttons of my controller. And once that is done, then we'll go press A on RetroPie. And we'll move down to the Wi-Fi setup. And from there, it's going to prompt us here to set our country. So we'll go ahead and hit yes. And then we'll move down to the localization options. Select wireless LAN and select United States. In my case, you'll want to select your country. Hit OK and finish. And if it asks you to reboot, go ahead and say yes. And then we'll go back into Wi-Fi yet again and select connect to Wi-Fi network. So go ahead and press enter. Select your SSID or Wi-Fi name and enter a password. Now that Wi-Fi is active, it's a good idea to go to the RETROPIE setup up at the top here and go ahead and update. So we're going to go to RETROPIE setup and move down to update. Press enter and select yes to update all packages. Press enter on the OK prompt. The latest install script will be updated, so go ahead and hit enter on OK and then say yes to update the underlying OS. Once the update is complete, go ahead and shut down RETROPIE completely and power off the machine. Now we're going to go ahead and plug in the SATA connector once again and move over to the PC. And here you can see all the directories that were automatically created for us and some additional files that were copied. So if we go to ROMs, for instance, you'll see there's no games that are pre-installed. So we'll go ahead and change that by copying a few games. So I'll go to the ROMs directory on the SSD drive and select Atari 2600 and go to ROMs on my NAS and copy a few games into the Atari 2600 folder. And you basically want to repeat this for any of the additional systems that you want to put on your SSD. Keep in mind, if you're just going to use the internal micro SD, then you may want to watch my other video. Okay, so now we got everything copied, and we're going to go ahead and power it up. And notice Emulation Station has now recognized all of our systems. And now we can begin playing. And of course, I got to play my favorite game, Galaga. If you set the safe shutdown switch to on in NESPi config, enable SSH and go ahead and hit enter on yes, and now it's enabled. From there, go ahead and hit finish. Now we'll switch over to the PC and go to the RETROFLAG.com website, and here we'll go to the GitHub page that has the safe shutdown script. Avoid selecting this one right here. You want to select the script for the NESPi 4 case. From there, go ahead and copy this command, and we're going to connect to RETROPIE using PuTTY. If you're not familiar with how to do that, there's a link below and a video that'll step you through it in more detail. To log in as Pi, and the password is Raspberry. And then right-click and paste in the command and press enter. The Raspberry Pi 4 will then restart and enable the script to allow the safe shutdown. As an example, here I'm turning on the unit for the first time after installing the script. Emulation Station will then start up and you'll see everything you saw before. Now to power it off, it's very simple. Just a single press to the power button will shut it down properly. And that completes the NESPi 4 setup video. Of course, there are other ways you could set it up. You could set it up such that the SSD is your boot drive and you totally eliminate the need for the micro SD. If you'd like to see a video on how to do that, please comment below and let me know. RETROFLAG has made some awesome cases, and this one is no exception. If you can appreciate the NES look and the power of the Raspberry Pi 4, then by all means, I highly recommend this case. If you found this video helpful, please click the like button to let me know. If you want to see more from Wagner's Tech Talk, please click the subscribe. And with that, I will talk to you very soon.